Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking perhaps the most crucial pivot in human development, moving beyond the immediate daily demands and stabilization needs of life.
Yeah, the day-to-day grind.
Exactly. And engaging with the monumental long-term question of legacy. Our mission today is really to explore what it means not just to survive an immediate challenge, but to consciously define your purpose and, well, your ultimate impact.
It's a huge question.
It is. We are asking the big fundamental question that sits right at the end of the human developmental process.
Yeah.
Erik Erikson's final stage, that challenge of integrity versus despair. What will your story be?
That shift you describe from just sort of operational survival day to day to thinking about long-term existential integrity, it's truly profound. It really is.
It feels like a different gear entirely.
It is. And it's where the work of finding lasting meaning really begins. It
Right.
seems to require a two-step process. First, there's this internal reconciliation, which means coming to terms with the past, the mistakes, the limitations of the self. And then second, there's deliberate external action designed to sort of transcend the self.
Right, to build something bigger.
Precisely. And to guide us through this pretty intricate journey, we've pulled together a really dense and diverse stack of sources. We're spanning from, like, the neurological underpinnings of conditioning, think Pavlov, Porges.
The real basics of behavior.
Yeah, mechanics. And then moving to the deep archetypal structures of the psyche, Jung and Adler territory, and also looking at practical behavioral science from people like James Clear, Daniel Pink, even Skinner, and relationship dynamics too, Gottman, attachment theory.
It's a wide net.
It is. The mission is to try and extract actionable, applicable insights on how to build a consciously lived life and hopefully ensure a truly positive generational contribution. That's the goal.
Absolutely. And maybe to ground this whole conversation, which could get pretty abstract, right?
Yeah.
We should probably revisit Martin Seligman's framework for well-being.
Ooh, PERMA. Good idea.
Yeah, PERMA. He argues that well-being isn't just happiness in a simple sense, but it's a much broader construct. And it's built on 5 measurable elements. P for positive emotion, E for engagement, R for relationships, M for meaning, and A for achievement.
Measurable components.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we talk about legacy today, we are fundamentally asking you, the listener, to maximize meaning and achievement. But here's the critical insight, I think.
What's that?
Meaning and achievement are rarely maximized in isolation. You can't just focus on one.
That's absolutely right. A legacy focused purely on, say, achievement, maybe huge financial success, but without meaning or deep relationships. It often just rings hollow, doesn't it?
It's totally empty. Yeah.
Legacy building is really the strategic prioritization, maybe integration of all these elements.
Right.
Meaning, in this context, is that sense that you belong to and serve something bigger than yourself.
Purpose beyond just you.
Exactly. And achievement is that purposeful movement toward desired goals. The greatest legacies, the ones that really resonate, they successfully fuse these two. They use high levels of engagement to build deep relationships while striving for achievements that serve some kind of transcendent meaning.
Which is why this psychological context we're about to dive into is so vital.
Absolutely vital. Because if our inner architecture is flawed, if the foundation is shaky, well, the whole structure of our meaning, our legacy, it just collapses.
Okay, let's get into it then. Part 1, the inner architecture of purpose, from conflict to integrity. All right, let's unpack this inner architecture. If we want to build something lasting, something positive, we first have to understand the fundamental psychological drives that often, well, push us off course, don't they?
They really do, often unconsciously.
And Ernest Becker gives us a foundational, maybe profoundly sobering perspective on the self. He argues that our entire character, our sense of self-worth, our purpose, it's actually a defense mechanism.
Yeah, it's bracing stuff.
He states that our character defenses support a sort of grand illusion. What exactly is this grand illusion, and why is our whole life script apparently built around maintaining it?
Well, the illusion, according to Becker, is designed to manage the primal human terror, the big one. The awareness of our own mortality, our ultimate vulnerability, our existential aloneness. It's that deep-seated fear. Becker suggests that we are fundamentally driven away from self-knowledge, away from radical self-reflection.
Because that would expose the truth.
Precisely. It would expose this deep, horrifying truth. So instead, we're driven towards anything that supports the fabricated lie of our character. He calls this fabricated inner sense of balance our automatic equanimity.
Automatic equanimity. Like a default setting for denial.
Kind of, yeah. We construct this narrative that says, I am important, I am stable, I am permanent, when, the raw reality is probably none of those things, not in the way we like to think. The grand illusion is essentially the denial of death and this desperate search for heroic significance to justify our brief existence.
Wow. Okay. The psychological implications of that are, frankly, terrifying.
Mm.
If we're driven by this quest for security, for maintaining this lie, why do we constantly seem to seek out drama or conflict or things that actively make us anxious? Why don't we just, lock ourselves in a safe room and stay there?
That's the core irony Becker highlights. It's a really sharp observation. While we crave security, anxiety itself is also a powerful spur to energetic activity. It gets us moving.
So we need a little bit of it.
Maybe. Or perhaps we flirt with danger, we create these controlled dramas, but we're not truly testing ourselves in a fundamental way. Becker says we're often just skirting the ultimate threat masterfully. We seek security, paradoxically, by entering into these deeply intertwined symbiotic relationships.
With what? People. Ideas.
Both. Could be with a person, a cause, an ideology, a group. The tragedy is that these relationships, which we seek out for safety and meaning, often end up enslaving us because they reinforce the very lie we've constructed about ourselves. If my entire sense of self, my okayness, relies on your validation or the group's approval or the ideology being right, then I'm trapped, even if part of me craves the freedom to define myself differently.
So you end up fighting the very thing you sought out for security.
Exactly. We strain against the chains of these relationships, wanting freedom, but that struggle often happens, as Becker puts it, uncritically. It's trapped within our own existing character defenses. We're fighting the symptoms, not the underlying denial.
That friction, that struggle within the defense mechanism, sounds like the perfect recipe for those deep-seated identity conflicts, the kind that can sabotage purpose before it even gets off the ground.
It really is.
Let's pivot now to transactional analysis, TA. Looking at that classic, I'm not okay, you're okay life position. This position, which is essentially a life script written unconsciously by the child ego state, seems designed to just confirm that negative self-assessment over and over again. How does this script maintain itself?
It maintains itself through what TA calls stroking, which sounds a bit odd, maybe.
Yeah, what does stroking mean here?
Stroking is the fundamental unit of recognition. It's basically any act, positive or negative, that implies, I know you're there. A smile, a frown, a compliment, an insult, even just eye contact.
Okay, so any form of attention.
Exactly. And humans are fundamentally driven to seek strokes. It's like psychological oxygen. If positive, affirming strokes aren't available, or if our script tells us we don't deserve them, then negative strokes, negative attention, criticism, punishment are sought.
Why would anyone seek negative attention?
Because no stroking at all, being completely ignored, invisible, that's considered the worst psychological fate. It's like solitary confinement for the psyche. So the I'm not okay position leads straight to despair because while the you is perceived as okay, meaning there is a source of stroking out there,
Right, other people have it figured out.
the individual's identity is tragically locked into that I'm not okay script. And they constantly, unconsciously, seek experiences and interactions that confirm this script. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So if they're actively seeking confirmation of their not okay state, how does this actually manifest behaviorally? Especially thinking about trying to build a legacy.
Well, the sources detail two primary self-sabotaging paths stemming from this position. One is through withdrawal.
Pull back.
Yeah. They seek positive strokes, but only through an elaborate internal wish life. It's the if only or when I finally fantasy land. If only I had more money, then I'd be okay. When I meet the right person, then I'll be happy. Their actual life is perpetually on hold, waiting for these external circumstances that they believe will magically make them okay.
So lots of potential, maybe, but zero execution.
Often, yes. It can look like high potential on the surface, but nothing ever actually happens. The second path is more visible, often more disruptive. It's provoking negative behavior.
The troublemaker.
Exactly. The bad little boy or the rebellious girl who unconsciously seeks negative stroking from others. They provoke conflict, they miss deadlines, they cause chaos, maybe subtly, maybe obviously. And they do this just to achieve what TA calls a fraudulent integrity.
Fraudulent integrity. What's that?
It means they find a perverse sense of consistency in being reliably not okay.
Double.
It's predictable. They know who they are in that negative script. The single constant is they are reliably not okay.
And the endpoint of this script.
The ultimate miserable resolution is despair. It can potentially lead down the path to institutionalization or even suicide, precisely because the mind is actively, if unconsciously, sabotaging itself to maintain its destructive truth. Breaking this loop, becoming aware of the script, is absolutely the first step toward writing a conscious legacy.
That drive to maintain a negative truth really speaks to the immense internal conflict that has to be overcome. It's like fighting yourself.
It is exactly like fighting yourself.
Speaking of internal conflicts, Carl Jung offers such a powerful image of the inner world. He describes the unity of consciousness not as a reality, not something we have, but as a desideratum.
A desideratum, yeah. Something wished for or desired, but not yet achieved, often never fully achieved.
So, if unity isn't the reality, what is the fundamental reality of the psyche, according to Jung?
The reality, in Jung's view, is that the psyche is a boiling cauldron of contradictory impulses, inhibitions, and effects. It's far from a neat, harmonious system. Consciousness itself is labile, it's dissociable, it can split off.
Like different parts warring with each other.
Pretty much. And what's critical here, especially for legacy, is that our conscious intentions, our plans, our goals, our desire to build something meaningful are constantly disturbed and thwarted by unconscious intrusions. These are forces whose causes initially feel alien, like they're coming from outside, but which actually originate from within the self, from the unconscious parts.
Our conscious plans get hijacked by our own inner stuff.
That's a good way to put it. Our ability to execute a conscious legacy plan is constantly menaced by these internal powers we're often not even aware of.
Can you give us a concrete example of this kind of alien power
Yeah.
at work? Something beyond just the theory.
Yeah, the sources cite a really poignant historical example. It's about a philosopher who became absolutely obsessed with the idea that he was suffering from cancer.
Okay.
Now, numerous clinical specialists, doctors had assured him he was perfectly healthy. Objectively, medically, he was fine. He possessed the conscious, rational knowledge that he was healthy.
He knew he wasn't sick.
Consciously, yes. Yet an unconscious intrusion, a deeply rooted fear, maybe a shadow complex related to decay or meaninglessness, it completely thwarted that conscious knowledge. It led him to believe he could have it, or maybe already did, despite knowing better rationally.
Wow, that sounds agonizing.
It was described as insupportable. This internal conflict, the conscious knowledge versus the alien unconscious intrusion, became unbearable. It prevented him from living in his present, healthy reality. It drove him toward this self-imposed anxiety and ultimately a kind of premature despair, consumed by a phantom illness.
So, if the psyche is this boiling cauldron, constantly disturbed by unconscious contents, we clearly need some way to manage the heat, right? To avoid getting burned or blown off course.
Absolutely. We need a strategy.
This leads us right to the critical role of confronting our shadow figures in myth. Jung studied the trickster archetype, which he said represents a vanishing level of consciousness. If this is some primitive, vanishing aspect of the self, why is it still so relevant to our modern work on legacy?
This is where Jung provides a really critical insight into self-development, into psychological growth. What's fascinating and kind of counterintuitive is that the myth of the trickster, this primitive, darker, often embarrassing, contradictory aspect of the self.
The part we don't like to show people.
Exactly. That part is actually actively sustained and fostered by consciousness.
Wait, consciousness keeps it alive? Why would it do that? I'd assume we'd want to repress or eliminate the primitive parts.
Yeah.
Get rid of them.
That's the typical assumption, yeah. But Jung argues that this maintenance, this keeping the trickster myth alive, is the best and most successful method of keeping the shadow figure conscious and subjecting it to conscious criticism.
Okay, hang on. So we foster the shadow. We actively maintain awareness of our primitive sides, our jealous bits, our self-sabotaging urges, not to let them win,
Not at all.
but specifically to keep them visible, so we can see them, challenge them, correct them in the light of consciousness.
Precisely. Think about it. If we repress those contradictory or negative contents, if we pretend the philosopher's fear of cancer doesn't exist, or that the bad little boy script is ancient history.
Push it down.
Right. Then they have the best chance of survival because nothing is corrected in the unconscious. Repressed contents don't go away. They gain a kind of independence down there. They become those alien powers that hijack our conscious will, popping up unexpectedly and causing havoc.
So, defining a positive legacy, writing a conscious story, it requires first confronting and criticizing the shadow aspects. Otherwise, They'll write their own negative script from the depths, won't they?
They absolutely will. It's about integrating the whole self, dark parts included, to preserve our full integrity and consciously choose our path.
Okay, so once we've done that really difficult, often painful inner work, confronting the shadow, neutralizing those negative scripts, that internal reconciliation you mentioned,
The foundational work.
we need the actual mechanics. We need the tools to build a life that matches that revised internal narrative. It's the shift from the internal desideratum, the wish, to external action.
Yeah, putting rubber on the road.
Exactly. We need to translate intent into lasting impact. And for that, it seems we have to turn to the science of habits. James Clear's model, specifically, feels like the essential mechanical basis for building a meaningful life brick by brick.
This model is so essential because, let's face it, intent is cheap. We all intend to do great things, but behavior is hard. Consistency is hard. Habits are essentially just automated solutions to the problems we face frequently in our environment.
Little shortcuts the brain creates.
Exactly. And all habits, good or bad, proceed through 4 distinct stages in the same continuous loop. There's a cue, then a craving, then a response, and finally a reward.
Cue, craving, response, reward.
Okay, the cue is the trigger, the piece of information that predicts a reward is coming. The craving is the motivational force, that anticipation of the reward, the desire. The response is the actual habit, the behavior itself. And the reward is what satisfies the craving, reinforces the behavior, and basically tells your brain, hey, this loop is worth remembering and repeating.
So to build a powerful legacy, which requires consistent positive action, you have to become a master designer of systems that maximize the efficiency of this loop for good habits.
Precisely. Starting with Clear's first law. Make it obvious.
Make it obvious. That sounds like it's fundamentally about awareness and maybe environmental design. You can't correct what you don't see, right?
Absolutely. It starts with awareness. We have 3 specific techniques from Clear for mastering this first law. First, there's the habits scorecard.
What's that?
It's super simple but powerful. It just demands awareness. You literally track exactly what you do every day, maybe for a few days or a week, without judgment initially. Just list out your behaviors, wake up, check phone, make coffee, etc. This process exposes your current, often invisible habits. You see the patterns.
Okay, bringing the unconscious habits into the light, like the shadow work.
Exactly like the shadow work, but for behavior. Second, we use implementation intentions.
Right, I've heard of these.
This is a deliberate process of planning when and where a new habit will occur. You use the specific format. I will behavior at time in location, for example. I will meditate for 10 minutes at 700 a.m. in the living room.
Why is being so specific helpful?
Because the simple act of coupling the desired behavior to a specific time and context drastically increases the likelihood of follow-through. You're basically preloading the decision. You're leveraging your environment, the time and location, as the immediate, visible cue. It removes ambiguity.
Makes sense. And the third technique for making it obvious.
This one's really powerful. Habit stacking. The formula is, after a current habit, I will new habit.
Ah, so linking a new habit to one you already do automatically.
Precisely. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write down one thing I'm grateful for. After I take off my work shoes, I will change into my workout clothes. You're leveraging the momentum of an existing, established cue. It's like behavioral inertia. You just attach the new behavior to the moving train.
It's fascinating how the brain uses context to automate behavior. Sometimes in unexpected ways, like that insomniac study you mentioned.
Oh, that study is a brilliant illustration of the sheer power of context design. Context over willpower, often. In that study, scientists instructed chronic insomniacs to do something very specific. Get into bed only when they were actually feeling tired.
Not just because it's bedtime.
Right. And crucially, if they couldn't fall asleep within a specific short time frame, say 15-20 minutes, they had to immediately get out of bed and go sit in a different room until they felt sleepy again. Then they could go back to bed.
So breaking the association between bed and frustration.
Exactly. They systematically trained the subjects' brains to break that negative association where the bed cue was linked to anxiety, tossing and turning, maybe scrolling on their phone. Instead, the brain learned, through repeated practice, to associate the context of the bed exclusively and automatically with the action of sleeping. The environment, the redesigned context, was the solution, not sheer willpower.
Your legacy, then, is quite literally built one daily action at a time. And those actions are heavily determined by the environment and the intentional cues you design within it.
That's the mechanical reality of it, yes.
Okay, so we have the mechanics of habits. But the successful execution of habits, especially over the long haul needed for legacy, brings us directly to the necessary fuel, motivation. Specifically, the motivation for mastery.
Yes, the drive behind the habits.
For these long-term legacy goals, we need to shift fundamentally from what Daniel Pink calls motivation 2.0, which is basically carrots and sticks, compliance-based.
External rewards and punishments.
Right. We need to shift to motivation 3.0, which is based on intrinsic engagement. And that, Pink argues, is absolutely necessary for the deep, sustained pursuit of mastery.
This shift is so vital for any kind of contribution that extends over decades, which is what legacy implies. Mastery, that deep, innate desire to get better and better at something that matters to you, is described as an important but often dormant part of our drive. We all have it, but often our environments don't activate it.
And the statistics on its absence in the modern professional world are pretty stark, aren't they?
They're frankly damning. They're a damning indictment of our over-reliance on Motivation 2.0. We know from Gallup and others that over 50% of U.S. employees report being not engaged at work, just kind of showing up. And worse, nearly 20% are actively disengaged. They actually resent their jobs.
Actively working against the company's goals sometimes.
Potentially, yes. And this massive disconnect, this failure to harness the natural human drive for mastery and purpose, it costs the U.S. economy an estimated $300 billion, with a B, annually in lost productivity.
That number isn't just lost money, is it?
Not at all. It's lost human potential. It's lost creativity. It's lost opportunity for meaningful contribution, for building legacies. It's a tragedy on a huge scale.
It is staggering that we tolerate that level of disconnection from purpose in our working lives. Angela Duckworth's research connects this kind of sustained engagement directly to grit, which she defines as passion and perseverance for long-term goals.
Right, sticking with things even when they're hard.
But the kind of grit needed for a truly impactful legacy, it seems it requires a purpose that scales massively beyond just the self, doesn't it? It can't just be about personal achievement.
It absolutely does. When mastery, getting really good at something, aligns with a deep internal purpose that serves or benefits others, that provides the necessary fuel. That's the rocket fuel to overcome the inevitable setbacks, the struggles, the plateaus.
Like the example purpose from the source material.
Yeah, think about that self-perceived purpose cited, helping people realize they're capable of more than they know. That kind of vision, a transcendent purpose that's bigger than just immediate monetary gain or self-enhancement, that provides the moral and psychological compass for the long, often arduous pursuit of mastery.
And that kind of purpose can grow.
It scales beautifully. That purpose can scale from influencing individuals to building great teams to leading ethical companies and even guiding entire communities or countries towards a better future. That sustained, directed striving, fueled by purpose beyond the self, that is the essence of a lasting professional or personal legacy.
If we connect this idea of directed striving to the bigger psychological picture, we really have to address Alfred Adler's distinction. He talked about the difference between striving for neurotic power versus striving for genuine perfection, which he saw as the hallmark of the healthy individual aiming for a legacy goal. This distinction feels crucial for defining true purpose versus something else.
Adler gives us such a useful psychological filter for looking at ambition. He warns that the neurotic individual, often driven by deep feelings of inadequacy or inferiority, is characterized by self-enhancement and self-centered striving.
It's all about them, basically.
Fundamentally, yes. Because of this deep-seated sense of lack, their ambition often manifests as striving for power, specifically, the aggressive need to overpower and control others. It's about dominating the situation, making others feel small, to mask their own inner sense of weakness or not okayness.
That doesn't sound very constructive or sustainable.
It isn't. It's defensive, it's self-bounded, and ultimately it isolates the individual. They might achieve conventional success, but they don't build genuine connection or lasting positive impact. They seek to look big by making others feel small.
Okay, but if that's the neurotic striving, what does purposeful, healthy striving look like in Adler's view, especially in this context of building a legacy?
The healthy individual, Adler suggests, automatically safeguards himself, and herself, we'd add now, by striving for a goal beyond himself.
Beyond the self again.
Yes, a goal based on, and these are key terms for Adler, interest in reality, interest in others, and interest in cooperation. This is pretty much the definition of purposeful contribution. Their ambition isn't about overcoming others. It's about overcoming the problem, whether that problem is poverty, disease, ignorance, bad design, injustice, whatever it might be.
So they team up with reality and other people.
Exactly. They seek to cooperate with reality and with others to reach a goal that benefits the collective, the community, the we, rather than just the I. That defines a legacy centered on contribution and mutual growth, rather than competition and dominance. It's about lifting others up, not pushing them down.
Which brings us squarely to part three, because legacy, at its core, really is a social footprint, isn't it? It's relational.
Absolutely. It lives on in others.
No matter how much mastery we achieve personally or how much achievement we rack up, our greatest lasting impact is often relational. It's how we shape the people, the families, the communities around us. So let's look at attachment theory. It seems crucial for understanding why we often fall into these painful patterns that actively damage the very relational legacy we hope to leave.
Attachment styles are these deeply ingrained relational scripts, usually formed in early childhood, that dictate how we respond to intimacy, closeness, and especially conflict. And what you often see, certainly in clinical settings and just in life, is this strong, almost magnetic, mutually damaging attraction between anxious and avoidant attachment types.
The classic push-pull dynamic.
Exactly that. They are drawn together, often unconsciously, because each person gets to reenact a familiar, albeit negative, script about relationships. The avoidant partner confirms their self-perception of being strong, independent, maybe a bit suffocated by others who seek too much closeness.
And the anxious partner.
The anxious type confirms their core belief that they want more intimacy and reassurance than their partner can or will provide, and that ultimately they'll probably be let down or abandoned if they aren't vigilant.
So they're sort of perfectly mismatched to confirm each other's worst fears about relationships.
In a tragic way, yes. They are mutually drawn to confirm their negative working models of relationships. They often get stuck in that painful pursue-withdraw cycle where the anxious person pushes for connection and the avoidant person pulls away, which just escalates the whole thing and confirms everyone's not okay position about love.
It's bleak. And many people, when they hit that kind of conflict repeatedly, they view it as definitive proof. Proof of incompatibility, proof the relationship is doomed.
Yeah. See? I told you it wouldn't work.
Right. But the sources note these assumptions are often unsubstantiated, which raises a really important question. If these attachment scripts are so powerful and often lead to conflict, how can we possibly salvage this relational legacy? How do we stop the cycle when conflict inevitably erupts?
Well, attachment theory and decades of relationship research, like Gottman's work, demonstrate something really hopeful. All couples, even the most secure, long-lasting ones, the ones who leave the most robust relational legacy for their kids, they all have fights. They all disagree.
It's not about not fighting.
No. The difference is not how much they disagree or even what they disagree about sometimes. The crucial difference is how they disagree and, critically, what they do afterward to repair the connection.
Repair is key. Repair is absolutely key. Conflict, when it's managed securely, actually serves as an opportunity to deepen the bond. It's a chance to show commitment, trustworthiness, and care despite the disagreement. This is why techniques like using soft startups, beginning a difficult conversation gently, focusing on your own feelings, I feel, rather than blame you always, are so critical.
And trying to fix things during the fight.
Yes, making and accepting repair attempts, like cracking a small joke, offering a touch, saying, could we take a break? These become critical. These actions signal underneath the surface conflict, hey, I care about us more than I care about winning this argument or being right. That's the secure base in action.
So the core tool, then, for building and maintaining this secure relational legacy is effective communication, particularly around our core emotional needs, which often stem from attachment style. How should anxious and avoidant types ideally communicate their needs without just triggering each other and reverting to those self-sabotaging scripts? This is the high wire act, isn't it? For anxious types, the fundamental underlying need is often strong reassurance. Reassurance that their partner loves them, respects them, finds them important, and that the connection is safe and secure.
They need to feel anchored.
Yes. For avoidant types, the core need is often for distance, for space, for a degree of separateness. They need room to regulate their own emotions without feeling pressured, controlled, or smothered by the partner's needs or intensity.
Space to breathe.
Exactly. The key, the absolute key, is that these often opposing attachment needs must be communicated clearly, calmly, and specifically without resorting to attacks or defensiveness.
Yeah.
That's the ideal.
Can you give an example?
Sure. An anxious person, instead of saying accusingly, "You never pay attention to me,"
Right.
might learn to say, "I'm feeling a bit disconnected tonight. Could we spend maybe 15 minutes just talking with no distractions after dinner? That would really help me feel close to you."
Framing the need constructively, based on their feeling and a specific request.
Precisely. And an avoidant person, instead of just shutting down or snapping, might learn to say, "I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. I need about 30 minutes by myself to clear my head, but I care about resolving this. Can we talk again after that?"
Acknowledging the partner while stating their own need for space.
Yes. It respects both self and other. It's incredibly difficult to do in the heat of the moment, but it's learnable.
And beyond the words themselves, the partner's willingness to hear and respond to that need, even if it's different from their own, that seems like the real bedrock.
It is absolutely the bedrock. Beyond the communication skills themselves, what's vital is the partner's responsive concern. Their demonstrated commitment to the other's well-being, even when it's inconvenient or triggers their own stuff. Their willingness to try and work on things together. This mutual willingness, this active responsiveness, this is the bridge over the inherent incompatibility gap that probably exists in all long-term relationships.
That commitment to repair, to showing up for the other's needs, that
Yeah.
sounds like the legacy we hope to leave our children about what love looks like.
It truly is. It's modeling secure functioning.
Now let's broaden out. How do we pass this relational wisdom, or sometimes, sadly, the lack thereof, to the next generation more broadly? Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence gives us a really practical template for how emotional competence and empathy are taught and transferred. These seem central to a positive social footprint.
Yeah, relational wisdom isn't just inherent, it's largely taught and learned. And Goleman highlights a key finding from some seminal studies on empathy development in children. It showed that kids were significantly more empathic when parental discipline included calling attention to the distress their misbehavior caused someone else.
Okay, how does that work?
So instead of simply saying, "That was naughty," or "Go to your room," a parent might say something like, "Look how sad you've made Sarah feel by taking her toy without asking. See her face."
Focusing on the other person's feelings.
Exactly. This is critical because it draws the child's attention directly to the emotional consequence of their actions on another person. It links behavior to empathy. It fosters a sense of relational accountability. It shifts the focus from just personal punishment, "I got caught," to the collective impact, "My actions hurt someone."
That feels like a much more pro-social way to handle discipline.
It absolutely is. It builds the foundation for moral reasoning based on care, not just rules.
And this kind of learning, this empathy building, it can't just stop at the family level, can it? If we want to establish a truly robust social legacy, we need to create environments, schools, communities that universally reinforce these lessons, moving towards that concept of a caring community.
Exactly right. Goleman really emphasizes the value of creating, for example, a caring community culture within schools, where students feel genuinely respected, bonded with peers and teachers, and safe enough to express vulnerability and learn from mistakes without shame.
An emotionally intelligent environment.
Yes. It requires a holistic approach that intentionally weaves together the efforts of the school, the parents, and the broader community. Think about that New Haven example cited in the sources.
What do they do there?
They recognized that many students came from unstable or difficult home lives, lacking consistent emotional support. So the community actively recruited responsible, caring adults, just regular people, to serve as mentors for these students.
Not just academic tutors.
No, much more than that. They were providing a stable, nurturing, emotionally intelligent presence. Someone reliable who showed up, listened, offered guidance. They were essentially establishing the crucial safety preconditions necessary for those kids' future well-being and allowing them to focus on learning.
That's direct, tangible legacy work right there, providing a supportive environment for those who are just starting to write their own story.
Couldn't agree more. It changes trajectories.
Now, when we talk about designing the environment for the next generation, we inevitably bump up against B.F. Skinner's challenging, often controversial, perspective on control and behavior. He shifts the focus almost entirely onto environmental design, doesn't he?
He absolutely does. Skinner's objective, as stated in his work, is intensely pragmatic, maybe even radically so. It's to induce people not to be good, but to behave well. There's a subtle but crucial difference there.
Behave well, not be good. What's the distinction?
The distinction lies in where the credit for the behavior resides. If we rely on punishing bad behavior after it happens, then the individual has to figure out, through trial and error, how to behave well to avoid punishment. When they succeed, the concept of the autonomous man, the individual with free will and inherent goodness, gets the credit. Look how virtuous John is.
Okay, that's the standard view.
Right. But Skinner argues if the environment is designed perfectly, if the contingencies of reinforcement, rewards for good behavior, lack of reward for bad, are subtle, consistent, and universally effective, then people behave well automatically. They don't even think about misbehaving because the environment guides them smoothly. And in that case,
The environment gets the credit.
the environment or the system designer gets the credit. It's the perfect system that produces the good behavior, not necessarily the inherent goodness of the individual.
That sounds, well, almost dystopian, or at least deeply uncomfortable. If the environment enforces good behavior automatically, is that behavior truly reflective of the individual's ethical core? Doesn't that undermine the whole concept of a conscious legacy built on moral choice?
That is precisely the philosophical tension and why Skinner is so controversial. He would argue that if we want a world defined by cooperation, peace, and well-being, a strong, positive legacy for humanity, we should prioritize achieving that well-being through clever environmental control rather than clinging to the potentially messy and unreliable notion of abstract moral autonomy.
So, good outcomes trump inner virtue.
In his framework, effectively, yes. The issue for us, as learners thinking about legacy, comes down to the visibility of that control. Skinner himself notes something fascinating, as environmental contingencies become harder to see.
Like what?
Like hidden police cameras, pervasive digital surveillance, maybe even a deeply ingrained belief in an all-seeing God who punishes wrongdoing eventually. As the control becomes less obvious,
And what happens?
then the perceived goodness of the autonomous man becomes more apparent. The individual appears inherently virtuous, making good choices, even if the underlying punitive or controlling aspects of the environment are actually maximal, just hidden from view.
Wow, so we might think we're being good freely, when actually we're just responding to invisible pressures.
That's the possibility Skinner raises. So, the challenge for those of us hoping to leave a lasting, positive legacy through environmental design, whether it's in our families, workplaces, or communities, is incredibly complex. How do we design an environment that promotes automatic good behavior, cooperation, kindness, responsibility, without relying on being permanently punitive or subtly coercive?
And worse, as the sources hint, without making the inhabitants lesser persons, people who haven't learned the inherent value of hard work or struggle or grappling with painful stimuli simply because everything is made too easy or too controlled for them.
That balance is everything. A functional environment for a positive legacy must somehow encourage both well-being and the development of genuine moral agency, the ability to choose integrity even when the environment might allow otherwise. If the environment is too perfect, too controlling, maybe that capacity for real moral choice erodes.
A difficult needle to thread. Finally, in this section on social footprint, we absolutely have to confront the most profound negative social legacy, the one that can undermine and destroy all this careful work.
Trauma.
Yes, the legacy of unresolved pain.
Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, and others have done so much to clarify how trauma isn't just a bad memory or mental event. It's an undischarged biological state, often locked in the body, and tragically often passed down generationally.
This somatic perspective is crucial for understanding why some families, communities, or even entire populations appear stuck in repeating cycles of conflict and suffering. Trauma, in this view, is essentially mobilized survival energy, the energy of the fight, flight, or freeze response that got locked or frozen in the nervous system during the overwhelming event. Often by the freezing mechanism itself, what Levine sometimes calls the Medusa complex.
Frozen in time, almost. In a physiological sense, yes. The nervous system, particularly the internal systems that regulate threat detection and response, like the autonomic nervous system, remain hyper-aroused long after the actual danger has passed. This results in chronic symptoms: hypervigilance, always scanning for danger, an exaggerated startle reflex, chronic muscle tension, especially neck and shoulders, maybe shallow breathing, digestive issues.
The body still thinks the threat is present.
Exactly. The body struggles to locate the source of the pervasive sense of threat because the danger is now internal. It's locked in the dysregulated nervous system, not necessarily present in the external environment anymore. This mobilized energy remains stuck, creating a constant internal feeling of danger unless it is allowed to discharge gently, quietly, and safely.
And this is where the truly staggering negative social legacy comes into play, the concept of traumatic reenactment. Can you explain how this internal biological state translates into these catastrophic social and generational conflicts we sometimes see?
When individuals, or worse, entire groups or populations carry this chronic, unresolved hyperarousal state from past traumas, like war, oppression, abuse, they're often compelled, usually subconsciously, to repeat or reenact situations reminiscent of the original trauma.
Why would they do that? It sounds counterproductive.
It is, but it happens because they feel this deep, pervasive internal danger or agitation that has no clear, visible external source in the present. To make sense of this internal chaos, this free-floating fear or rage, they unconsciously seek an external enemy. They need to localize the pervasive internal threat onto something or someone outside themselves.
Finding a target for the fear.
Precisely. They project the internal fear and helplessness outward. It is them. They are the enemy. If I can just control or eliminate them, then this horrible feeling inside me will finally stop and I will be safe. This dynamic, played out on a large scale, leads to these staggering, seemingly intractable cycles of violence, prejudice, and conflict, where populations, as Elaine puts it, seem compelled to slaughter each other. They're destroying their own futures in a desperate, misguided attempt to find internal equilibrium, to discharge that locked-in traumatic energy violently.
It's a devastating cycle. Healing this kind of generational trauma, then, requires immense patience, safety, and self-awareness. Dr. Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion highlights that simply holding the pain in mindful awareness is the first gentle step toward recovery.
And it must be done with self-compassion. That mobilized energy of trauma needs a path out, needs to complete its cycle, but that path must feel safe and be taken slowly to avoid re-traumatization. Flooding the system again is counterproductive. The saying often used in somatic therapies, go slowly, walk farther, is absolutely critical here.
Patience is paramount.
Immense patience. Self-compassion allows us to acknowledge and validate the pain. Yes, this is real, this hurts, without turning away in fear or trying to aggressively fix it immediately. It's about holding the pain with warmth, love, and kindness, rather than doing what many people instinctively do,
Which is?
trying to stomp it out with quick fixes, using alcohol, drugs, workaholism, risky behaviors, any kind of addictive mind-altering experience that temporarily numbs the pain but ultimately interrupts the body's natural, slower healing process and often digs the hole deeper.
So true legacy building, especially in families or communities touched by trauma, requires healing the past first, so that the next generation doesn't inherit a nervous system locked in fear and primed for reenactment.
That's perhaps the most profound legacy we can offer, breaking the cycle of transmitted trauma. It requires immense courage and support. #outro.
Wow. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today. We've traveled from the boiling cauldron of the individual psyche, wrestling with the denial of death and those tricky shadow aspects,
The deep inner work.
through the practical mechanics of habit formation and the essential drive for mastery fueled by purpose beyond the self.
Building the engine.
And finally, landing on the crucial importance of our social footprint, the quality of our relationships, the environments we create, and the heavy burden of healing generational trauma. The thread connecting all of this seems to be conscious intention, the active decision to author your life story rather than just letting it be written by default.
And that decision really returns us to the concept of choice, but not just any choice, a choice that must be made mindfully. Barry Schwartz, in his work on the paradox of choice, urges us to be choosers, not pickers.
Choosers, not pickers. What's the difference?
Picking is passive. It's simply selecting from the options that are immediately available or presented to you by your environment, by your habits, by your unconscious scripts. It's easy, often thoughtless. Choosing, on the other hand, is far deeper, far more active. It involves deliberate reflection on the decision's actual importance in the grand scheme of your life. It involves the active creation of new options where maybe none seemed to exist before. And critically, Schwartz says, it involves understanding what a particular choice says about the chooser as an individual. What values does this choice reflect? Who am I becoming by making this choice?
So it's about aligning choices with identity and values.
Exactly. This mindful, reflective choice, the act of choosing rather than just picking that, is the seed of a conscious legacy. It's the moment you truly assume responsibility for your story.
So reflecting on everything we've discussed, what does this all mean for you, the listener, and the story you are writing right now, today? We can return to Jung and that fascinating idea about the shadow. Remember, consciousness doesn't just let archaic psychological forces fade away quietly into the night.
No, it actively engages them.
We learned that the awareness of our darker, more primitive sides, the trickster, the shadow, the I'm not okay script, the neurotic striving for power, that awareness is actually fostered and sustained by consciousness itself. We have to bring these elements into the light, specifically to keep them subject to conscious criticism and choice.
So the final question for you to take away from this deep dive, the question that really defines whether you ultimately choose Erickson's path of integrity or fall into despair is this. What parts of your whole, complicated, sometimes contradictory self, the selfish drive for power perhaps, the anxious need for absolute security, the subtle urge towards self-sabotage, what parts must you actively keep conscious? What shadows must you continue to foster awareness of, not to indulge them, but so that you can consciously choose the story and therefore the legacy you leave behind?
Because if you repress it,
If you repress it, it only gains strength as an alien, unconscious power ready to hijack your best intentions. But if you acknowledge it, if you wrestle with it, if you subject it to conscious criticism, then you maintain conscious control. You truly become the author. The choice, as always, remains yours.